Against all odds, you're watching Season 6 of the Wikkid podcast, now in Technicolor. Trigger warning, I'm Mike Moore. Season 6 is the closest I come in these online musings to finished thought, with a bunch of the fun stuff removed for the sake of clarity. It's the Wikkid podcast stripped down for YouTube, which is a comment on it being my relatively focused, near conclusions about Christianity and Christian upbringing, rather than a comment on how I'm dressed while recording it. Ultimately, this is me trying to land somewhere on the big topics my friends and I meandered around in the previous seasons. Nothing wrong with meandering, of course, but sometimes people just want to know what your position on a thing is, so they can decide whether they approve of you or not. A lot of the time, I am frustratingly unwilling to simply side with Team Red or Team Blue on a given issue, but sometimes I do reach a position on a thing. I really wasn't sure if there was going to be a Season 6. I'm out of old songs I've written that I think are still worth working on a bit. I probably said about all I need to say about depression and working through that kind of thing. So I've decided to focus pretty much exclusively on religious topics for this one season. I've decided to try to sum up my thinking on a few of the key topics I've been going over. So it's me seeing how concisely and briefly I can get across what I think now, after my very haphazardly working through a bunch of it in previous seasons of the podcast. Those seasons also spent a lot of time on songs and anecdotes and so on. Time might be saved by not having guests and keeping humor and music to a minimum. I thought, hey, let's get rid of all the fun stuff. I'm trying to be clear as to what I think about a few specific topics relevant to my spiritual growth. I wasn't exactly speaking in parables before, all Jesus-like or anything, but I was relying on anecdotes upon story a great deal. I'm going to try to do that a lot less. I'm not sure how I'll do. Also, it goes without saying that I'm not any good at brevity. I'm not any good at that at all. I also plan an inversion. Instead of creating the thing as an audio-only podcast with some YouTube tie-ins, I think I will try seeing if I can make it work primarily as YouTube content with an audio version podcast drawn from that. I have become the destroyer of brains, a YouTube content creator. Don't bother hitting like and subscribe unless you really want to, though. It's a nice gesture, but I don't need you to do that. After all, I'm not selling Nestea Athletic Greens or BetterHealth on here or anything.
A bit of background. I was raised in a fairly strict home, in a fairly strict branch of a fairly strict fundamentalist Christian sect, often referred to by other people as the Plymouth Brethren, Tunbridge Wells exclusives, or Closed Brethren, in case you're curious about the specifics. So, no Halloween or Christmas, no TV or movies or modern music or dancing, and no hanging out over much with non-members for the most part at all. Sundays were for God, so there were absolutely zero recreational or entertaining activities for us on Sundays. Not so much as a quiet game of Scrabble or going for a swim or a jog. And all week long, we needed to be separate from other people, distinct, especially from other Christians. No real connection to or interactions with any other Christian groups or their teaching or recorded audio or video or music or anything really. Definitely no sneakily attending their services or events. Regular church services at our church 5 times a week, no musical instruments allowed during services, with a host of additional church activities and obligations each month. Basically, if we weren't at school or home or work, we were likely at church. At only our church, and only with our people. The other Christians might be real Christians, maybe, but they weren't serious ones, not like us. They obviously didn't read their Bibles and do what it said in there, clearly. I should get out of the way right now that a lot of what I'm talking about in this podcast is community-level church pressure to meet, from toddlerhood, a host of obligations and expectations. And that stuff's hard to prove if people doubt you. I can know for absolutely certain sure that when I was a child and a teenager, certain very specific and quite arbitrary things were expected of me, and said things rewarded somewhat, while other things were consistently punished in various ways, subtle or otherwise. And I can know absolutely that praise and shame were used judiciously on us as part of a culture based largely around that. But all anyone really has to do to shoot down my simply presenting what my upbringing absolutely was like, is to say, well, that's not what I heard, or that certainly wasn't my experience. Sounds like you're imagining everything. Do you have a history of people not wanting you around? It sounds like a you problem more than a them problem. I'm sure that didn't happen quite how you describe. And anyway, what time of night was it? Where were you walking? What were you wearing? Is it possible you were, kind of asking for it? Fine. But a group can apply a great deal of pressure on children to definitely be this and absolutely not be that, all without really putting any of it into plain language or really admitting what's happening, certainly in writing. I talk a lot about what was happening, whether it was on paper or not, especially the conveniently deniable stuff. And about human groups, more widely speaking, you can form any human group you like, including a club or a church or an activist group, and you're going to reliably find that many of the folks are very regular people, into it up to a certain point, but with full, rich lives outside it that have little to do with it. Some of the other folks are people who are so checked out of the whole thing that you're really not sure why they show up to begin with when they do. And inevitably, you're going to learn that a tiny group of a whole other group of people are fanatics, driven by the white hot flames of, well, something or other. People who take things way too far and bring the crazy into everything. People who won't be slowed down a bit by mere facts, sense, honor, or human decency. People who want what they call leadership roles, and Nietzsche called power. It's not entirely unfair that most human groups are judged largely upon how we treat the wackos among us. And your mileage will vary, especially depending on which of those three kinds of members you let characterize, color, or even run the whole thing. If you let wackos run things or be the public face of the group, that's going to have an effect on how people relate to the rest of you guys. Despite what I just explained, I'm going to try to not go into the specifics of my own strict Christian group terribly much this season in order to make conclusions that may apply more broadly than just to people who grew up in the same group I did. So much of this is seen outside of the group I was born into, too. So I'm switching up the formula a bit for this season. I guess we'll see how that works. Like I said, I don't need you to like or subscribe to this channel, though you're certainly welcome to do so. What I'd prefer, actually, is comments, either right under the videos or in emails to me, wickedperson@gmail.com. Also, share this with someone or at least mention it to them. I like all that kind of thing. But I know you're not supposed to be seen to interact with me. I am, after all, a troublemaker of the first order, a wicked person. My church has officially said this and are not interested in discussing the matter further with me or with anyone else. I'm just wicked to perpetuity. The Bible tells them so.